On the surface, Sean "Diddy" Combs was untouchable. A music mogul, a fashion icon, a billionaire brand, a man who had rubbed shoulders with presidents, moguls, and the biggest stars in the world. For over 3 decades, Combs built a fortress of wealth, fame, and cultural dominance, from Bad Boy Records to Ciroc vodka and everything in between. But beneath the glitz and glamour, there was another story, one of whispered rumors, sealed settlements, and a darkness that allegedly spanned decades. And in November 2023, that darkness burst into the public light when a woman who had once loved him said, "Enough," the lawsuit that broke the silence on. November 16, 2023, singer and model Cassie Ventura, known simply as Cassie, filed a civil lawsuit in Manhattan federal court against Combs. It wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a bombshell. The 35-page complaint accused Combs of rape, physical abuse, sex trafficking, coercive control, and prolonged emotional manipulation. Cassie detailed a timeline of horrors stretching from 2005 to 2018, the span of her romantic and professional relationship with Combs. She claimed that while the world saw glitz, red carpets, and lavish music videos, she lived in fear, under surveillance, manipulated by money and drugs, and trapped in a cycle of alleged violence. Cassie painted a disturbing portrait of a man who she claimed operated like a cult leader behind closed doors, controlling her personal movements, her music career, and even her sex life. She described being coerced into freak-offs, Combs' alleged term for drug-fueled group sex parties where escorts, strippers, and friends were invited to engage in sexual acts while under the influence of ecstasy, ketamine, and other substances. But even more disturbing were her allegations that Combs beat her, raped her in a hotel room in 2018, and paid hush money to hotel staff to destroy security footage. The response from Combs' legal team was swift and aggressive. They called the accusations outrageous, offensive, and fictional. But behind the scenes, something else was brewing. Within 24 hours, the lawsuit was settled out of court. The terms were confidential. Cassie's attorneys simply said, "The matter has been resolved to the mutual satisfaction of the parties," but the damage was done. A floodgate opens Cassie's lawsuit, though resolved in mere hours, cracked something open. Over the next several weeks, 5 more women came forward, filing civil suits with eerily similar allegations. Among them was a woman identified as Jane Doe, who alleged that Combs had drugged and assaulted her in the 1990s when she was a teenager. Another accused him of recruiting women for sex through manipulation and threat under the guise of career advancement. The suits spanned decades, suggesting a pattern. Former employees, assistants, and even fellow artists began whispering their own stories in hushed tones. The culture around Combs' empire, once described as extravagant and wild, began to feel sinister and cult-like. The press dubbed it the Diddy Reckoning. And it was only beginning. The government steps in. While the civil cases dominated headlines, something more dangerous was happening behind the scenes. Federal authorities, including Homeland Security and the Department of Justice, began watching closely. Allegations of sex trafficking, narcotics, underage girls, coerced prostitution, and illegal surveillance were serious enough to merit investigation. Then came the raids. On March 25, 2024, coordinated raids were carried out simultaneously at Combs' homes in Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. The scenes were surreal. The raids, a media spectacle at Combs' lavish Holmby Hills estate in LA, Homeland Security agents clad in tactical gear stormed the property in armored vehicles. Drones buzzed overhead. Helicopters hovered as agents secured the perimeter. In New York, his high-rise condo in Manhattan was sealed off as investigators carried out boxes of evidence. In Miami, where Combs frequently hosted celebrity parties, his waterfront mansion was combed for electronics and security footage. The images went viral. Photos of law enforcement carrying out hard drives, electronics, and suitcases full of documents blanketed social media. A photo of agents wheeling out what appeared to be several locked briefcases fueled speculation of hidden data, possibly video footage of the alleged abuse. But it wasn't just electronics that caught headlines. What the feds found, according to leaked reports and later confirmed by court documents, the federal raids turned up a disturbing inventory. over 1,000 bottles of sexual lubricant stocked in closets and bathrooms, multiple firearms including illegally modified AR-15 style rifles with suppressors and extended magazines, a large stash of party drugs including ecstasy, GHB, and ketamine, all commonly associated with sexual assault cases. A cache of cell phones and encrypted hard drives, some hidden in false bottom drawers and safes, dozens of non-disclosure agreements, signed by women and men allegedly paid for silence, surveillance systems that allegedly recorded guests and intimate acts without their consent. Federal prosecutors suspected that Combs had systematically recorded sexual encounters, many involving intoxicated or incapacitated individuals, possibly to blackmail them later. A federal source told reporters anonymously, "We're not dealing with a celebrity who partied too hard. We're dealing with alleged organized criminal behavior, a potential sex trafficking enterprise aided by money, power, and intimidation." The public backlash, the court of public opinion, was swift and brutal. Combs's brand partnerships began to vanish. Diageo, the liquor conglomerate behind Ciroc and De Leon Tequila, terminated their partnership. Revolt TV, the media network he founded, saw advertisers flee. Radio stations began pulling his music. Celebrities who once called him brother went silent. Some unfollowed him on social media. Others gave cryptic statements, "Let's believe survivors," or "I stand with the truth." Former associates like Aubrey O'Day of Danity Kane came forward with their own damning stories of manipulation and abuse from the bad boy empire. O'Day accused Combs of psychological abuse, gaslighting, and career sabotage. In a shocking turn, former bad boy artists began speaking out. Mace, Loon, and others claimed that the music industry had turned a blind eye to Combs's behavior for decades. Combs denies everything. Despite the mounting allegations and the federal scrutiny, Sean Combs remained defiant. Through statements, he maintained his innocence and painted himself as the victim of a smear campaign fueled by opportunists. His lawyers called the raids a gross abuse of power, but Combs's tone had changed. The charisma was fading. The bravado seemed forced, and the silence from his once adoring celebrity friends was deafening. Behind the scenes, the grand jury moves. What the public didn't know until weeks later was that behind the headlines, a federal grand jury had quietly been convened. Prosecutors were building a RICO case, the same racketeering charge used to take down mafia bosses, drug cartels, and sex traffickers like Jeffrey Epstein and R. Kelly. At the heart of the case, whether Combs used his businesses, his money, and a network of enablers to operate a criminal sex enterprise. The timeline was tightening, witnesses were being called, phones were tapped, associates were being offered immunity in exchange for testimony, and as the calendar flipped to April 2024, Combs's empire, which once felt bulletproof, was starting to crumble. The pressure mounts be April, the world waited. Would Combs be arrested? Would a grand jury indict him? Or would he vanish behind private gates, never held accountable? The answer came later, but the foundations had already cracked. The lawsuits, the raids, the testimonies, they weren't isolated events. They were the opening salvo of a reckoning decades in the making, criminal indictment and preparation, Sept 2024, APR 2025. The months following the explosive raids of March 2024 were eerily quiet on the public front. No new arrests, no press, conferences, just whispers. But behind closed doors, the United States government was preparing to do something almost unthinkable: prosecute one of the most powerful figures in modern entertainment for federal crimes that could put him behind bars for the rest of his life. By September 2024, after months of surveillance, digital forensics, and grand jury testimony, the government moved decisively. And with that, the man once hailed as the king of bad boy became inmate, 2024-967, housed in federal detention. The indictment drops. September 16, 2024, on the morning of September 16, 2024, federal agents arrested Sean "Diddy" Combs at a private airport in Teterboro, New Jersey. He was reportedly preparing to board his Gulfstream jet heading to the Bahamas. Instead, he was placed in handcuffs and flown not to paradise, but to a federal detention facility in Manhattan. The 32-count federal indictment unsealed that afternoon. in U.S. District Court was staggering in scope and detail. Combs was charged with racketeering under the RICO Act, sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion, interstate transportation for illegal sexual activity, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit witness tampering, drug distribution and possession with intent to distribute illegal firearms possession. The indictment alleged that Combs had led a criminal organization dating back nearly 2 decades, using his vast wealth, influence, and businesses, including Bad Boy Records, Revolt TV, and various shell companies to recruit, transport, and exploit individuals, primarily women, for sex. The most damning accusation: Combs didn't act alone. He allegedly employed a network of enablers, drivers, assistants, security, guards, even attorneys, to arrange travel, book hotel rooms, administer drugs, and silence victims. The term used repeatedly in the indictment was chilling, a pattern of sexual exploitation disguised as a lifestyle. No bail for the Mogul in court that same week. Combs stood before Judge Aaron Subramanian in a designer suit and handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals. His legal team, led by criminal defense attorney Jeffrey Lichtman, requested pre-trial release on a $10 million bond, offering house arrest and 24/7 monitoring. But prosecutors argued forcefully that Combs posed both, a flight risk and a danger to the community. They cited multiple passports under aliases properties in jurisdictions with no extradition treaties, a history of intimidating or paying off accusers, surveillance footage allegedly showing Combs threatening witnesses. Judge Subramanian agreed. This court is not persuaded that wealth and status override concerns for public safety. Bail is denied. Combs was remanded to Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC Brooklyn, one of the toughest holding facilities in the Northeast. For the first time in his adult life, Sean Combs had no control. Inside the government's case, prosecutors made it clear they were not pursuing isolated accusations. They were building a RICO case, a method once reserved for mobsters and drug lords. It allowed the government to argue that Combs' entire lifestyle was part of an ongoing criminal conspiracy. They drew connections between the 2018 assault of Cassie in a Beverly Hills Hotel, a 2016 incident involving a woman dubbed Mia, Diddy allegedly drugged and coerced in Miami a 2020 party in Las Vegas, where 2 young dancers claimed they were filmed without consent, a consistent stream of payments from bad boy corporate accounts labeled consulting or event planning, which prosecutors said were cover for paying escorts and silencing victims. Even more chilling, a sealed portion of the indictment reportedly referenced underage victims. Federal investigators had recovered encrypted hard drives, and the contents were now being examined. Prosecutors hinted that new charges might be filed depending on what was found. The defense gears up. Combs' legal team began assembling a war chest of defense. In October 2024, high-profile criminal defense attorney Brian Steele, fresh off defending rapper Young Thug in his RICO trial, joined the team. They also hired experts in forensics, media manipulation, sex crimes, and digital privacy law. Their strategy became clear: consent defense. They argued that all sexual activities were consensual, part of an adult lifestyle involving open relationships, role play, and privacy agreements. The phrase swinger lifestyle was frequently used. Media bias and racial targeting. Combs' team accused federal authorities of targeting a successful black entrepreneur. They argued that the government and press were conflating edgy behavior with criminality. Discrediting the accusers, some defense motions sought to expose the past of several accusers, alleging financial motivations, inconsistencies, and even past drug use. Suppression motions. The defense filed to exclude key evidence obtained in the March 2024 raids, claiming violations of Fourth Amendment rights. They questioned the legitimacy of search warrants and the chain of custody for digital files. Public reaction. Divided and explosive. Public opinion was split, almost tribal. Some fans doubled down in support, using hashtags like Sachin Free Diddy and Sachin Set Puff Free. Conspiracy theories flourished, suggesting Combs was being punished for industry knowledge or political donations, but the majority viewed the indictment as validation, proof that money and fame no longer shield predators. Protesters rallied outside the courthouse with signs reading, "Believe Black Women" and "No One is Above the Law." Music festivals began quietly dropping his name from headliner lists. Spotify saw a steep drop in Diddy streams. His Revolt network was hit with mass advertiser pullouts. Pre-trial drama. April 2025 by April 2025, the legal battle was already a media circus. The prosecution released portions of video footage showing Combs berating women at parties, yelling racial and sexist slurs, and brandishing what appeared to be weapons. While not always directly criminal, the videos helped establish the environment of coercion and power imbalance. In response, the defense accused the DOJ of leaking prejudicial evidence to sway public opinion. A motion for change of venue to move the trial out of New York was filed, citing inflammatory press coverage. The judge denied it. Simultaneously, a second grand jury in California was considering additional state-level charges, including assault and unlawful surveillance. The net around Combs was tightening. Still, Combs himself maintained his innocence. In a rare pre-trial statement issued from jail, he said, "I have never trafficked anyone. I have never forced anyone to do anything against their will. These lies will fall under the weight of the truth." The road to trial, with the trial scheduled for May 5, 2025, both sides made final preparations. The prosecution had a list of over 40 potential witnesses, including Cassie, Jane, Mia, and even former Bad Boy staffers. It was rumored they had turned at least 2 former insiders into cooperating witnesses, both with immunity deals. Combs's defense had its own surprises: expert witnesses in sexual behavior, digital forensics, and even a psychologist who would testify about false memory syndrome in trauma victims. Jury selection loomed. Cameras were banned from the courtroom, but the world would be watching every word. Jury selection and opening statements, May 5, 12, 2025. The trial that would grip the nation didn't begin with dramatic testimonies or shocking footage. It began with silence, a long, tense silence in a federal courtroom in Lower Manhattan on the morning of May 5, 2025. Cameras were banned. Reporters weren't. And what they witnessed, day after day, was nothing short of historic. The federal government versus Sean "Diddy" Combs, a cultural titan now accused of being a criminal mastermind. This was not a celebrity civil dispute. This was a federal criminal trial. And in this room, Combs wasn't a mogul. He was a defendant. Day 1, the quiet before the fire. At 9:03 a.m., the doors of courtroom 26A creaked open, and the U.S. Marshals brought in Combs, dressed in a dark tailored suit, but no tie, his wrists unshackled, but his posture stiff. His legal team flanked him like a wall. Seated just feet away were federal prosecutors led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Michelle Andrews, a fierce litigator known for her work on human trafficking and organized crime. She was composed, crisp, and carried a mountain of evidence files in her briefcase. The room was full: legal analysts, court sketch artists, tabloid journalists, victims' advocates. Every bench was packed. The judge, Onesarun Subramanian, entered and signaled the beginning of what would be a painstaking, high-profile, emotionally grueling jury selection process. Voir dire. The challenge of finding 12 in any major trial, jury selection, voir dire, is delicate. In this trial, it was a battlefield. Over 600 potential jurors had been summoned. Each filled out a 20-page questionnaire probing their views on celebrity culture, attitudes towards sexual assault, and consent familiarity with Combs and the Bad Boy. Empire knowledge of the case through media. The goal was simple but nearly impossible: find 12 people who could be fair, who didn't already believe Combs was guilty or innocent, who weren't swayed by fame, tabloids, or social media. But this was Sean "Diddy" Combs. One woman was dismissed for being a lifelong fan. Another was excused for saying she believed famous men always get away with it. A schoolteacher sobbed. While admitting her sister had been a victim of trafficking, she too was dismissed. A man who had appeared on a podcast discussing Cassie's allegations was removed. Attorneys on both sides burned through peremptory challenges, with the defense particularly aggressive in eliminating potential jurors they believed might be swayed. by emotion or progressive ideals about gender power dynamics. The judge cautioned both parties against race-based dismissals, noting that Combs's identity as a powerful black man could both bias and protect him in different minds. May 8, 2025. A jury is seated after 4 exhausting days. The final jury was seated. Women and 5 men racially mixed, 6 white, 3 black, 2 Hispanic, 1 Asian. A range of professions. A nurse, a construction foreman, a paralegal, a restaurant manager, a retired teacher, a 24-year-old tech worker. The alternate. Jurors added further diversity. The judge delivered strict instructions: no phones, no news, no talking. Their role was not to determine if Combs was a monster or a hero, but simply to judge whether the evidence proved guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That bar was high, but the prosecution was ready. May 9, 2025, opening statements. The government assistant. U.S. Attorney Andrews stood and approached the jury box with methodical calm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this is not about music. It's not about fame. It's about exploitation, manipulation, power, and a decades-long criminal conspiracy." She then delivered a 90-minute opening statement that many courtroom observers later called devastating. Andrews walked the jury through a narrative of abuse and criminality that began in the early 2000s and spanned 2 decades. Her voice remained steady, but her words hit like punches. She claimed Combs used bad boy records and his personal security team to recruit young women, often under the guise of offering them modeling or music careers. She described exclusive parties at homes in Miami, Los Angeles, and the Caribbean, where drugs were abundant and security staff were instructed to lock phones in bags and monitor exits. She alleged that Combs had a collection of videos and photos, many recorded without consent, used as leverage to silence victims. Andrews read part of a text exchange from 2018 between Combs and an assistant. "Get Mia ready. Make sure the white's clean. She don't talk till I say." She looked the jury in the eye and ended with, "At the end of this trial, you'll see who Sean Combs really is when no one's watching. Not a producer, not a businessman, a predator, an organizer of abuse, and he must be held accountable." The defense fires back. Next came Combs's lead attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, a man known for defending controversial figures like El Chapo and John Gotti Jr. If the prosecution brought fire, Lichtman brought thunder. He stormed the courtroom with a scorched earth rebuttal. This case is built on exaggerations, innuendos, and career opportunists who smelled blood in the water the second Cassie filed her civil suit. Lichtman attacked the credibility of key witnesses, particularly those granted immunity in exchange for testimony. He insisted that much of the government's evidence was taken out of context, that private videos did not show coercion, but consensual adult behavior, and that NDAs were standard practice in celebrity circles, not evidence of guilt. He implied the prosecution was weaponizing Me Too culture to build a morality trial, not a legal one. This isn't a RICO case. This is a Netflix script with a federal badge slapped on the cover. The defense argued that many of the encounters now labeled trafficking or abuse were actually consensual and transactional, involving adults who partied, got paid, and then came back for more, until it became lucrative to sue. He closed with, "Sean Combs isn't perfect. He's human, but being rich and famous doesn't make you a criminal. You'll hear a lot of shocking stories. Don't confuse smoke with fire. Watch the evidence." The courtroom atmosphere. By the end of the week, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Court sketch artists captured Combs clenching his jaw during testimony. His mother, Janice Combs, attended daily, dressed in black, her face unreadable. Cassie, now a key witness for the prosecution, was escorted by U.S. Marshals and avoided the press. Outside, crowds gathered each morning. Protesters chanted for justice. Fans held signs that read, "Diddy, set me free." Cameras flashed. News vans lined the street. Inside, a sense of gravity settled. The jury was beginning to understand the sheer scale of what they were about to witness, a sprawling story of fame, violence, power, and possible justice. The first witness takes the stand as court adjourned on May 12th. the judge gave the jury the weekend to rest. But on Monday, May 13th, the trial would resume. And the first witness to testify? Cassie Ventura. The woman whose lawsuit started it all, the woman who, after years of silence, was finally ready to speak. Not in tabloids or settlements, but under oath. The trial was no longer a spectacle. It was a reckoning, key witnesses and damning testimony. May 13th, 2025. On the morning of May 13th, 2025, the nation leaned in. The cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but what happened within its walls would ripple across news, outlets, social media, and living rooms around the world. The first witness to take the stand was the woman who had shattered the illusion that Sean Diddy Combs was untouchable. She walked to the witness box slowly, carefully, like every step was deliberate. Her name, Cassandra Cassie Ventura. She wasn't a pop star that morning. She wasn't a fashion icon. She wasn't even Diddy's ex-girlfriend. She was the prosecution's cornerstone. And for 3 harrowing days, she told the jury and the world who Sean Combs really was when no one else was watching. Cassie's testimony. The girl who stayed too long, under oath, Cassie recounted 11 years of vast psychological manipulation, coercion, drug abuse, isolation, and physical violence. The courtroom was silent except for the soft scratching of pens on legal pads. She began by describing their first meeting in 2005. She was 19, bright-eyed, hungry for stardom. He was already a global mogul. He told me I had that look, that I was going to be his next big project. I thought I hit the jackpot. I didn't realize I'd just walked into a prison with no walls. She described their early romance as intoxicating. Lavish gifts, celebrity parties, private jets, but said it quickly turned dark. According to Cassie, Diddy controlled everything. What she wore, who she saw, when she could use her phone. He began introducing drugs early on. Ecstasy, cocaine, often without her consent. She was encouraged, then forced to engage in group sex with strangers, often filmed secretly. The most disturbing testimony came when she detailed violent outbursts. He would black out, scream, hit me, and then cry like a baby 5 minutes later, begging me to forgive him. She recalled one incident in 2018 at a Beverly Hills hotel, already documented in her now settled civil suit, where he punched her, dragged her by her hair, and held a gun to her head. The prosecution displayed photos from that night, blurred for court records, but clearly showing bruises and lacerations on her face, arms, and torso. Her voice cracked when she said, "I stayed because I was afraid of what he'd do if I left. He told me, if I can't have you, nobody can." And I believed him. During cross-examination, Combs's legal team tried to paint her as manipulative, attention-seeking, and financially motivated. They cited her 2023 settlement and her recent book deal, but the damage had been done. Even neutral observers said Cassie's testimony landed like a hammer. Other victims take the stand. Cassie was only the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, 7 other women, identified only by pseudonyms such as Mia, Jane, Nicole, Shoichi, and Tina, gave similarly chilling accounts. Mia, victim from Miami. A dancer recruited for a 2016 yacht party, Mia said she was drugged with a spiked drink and woke up hours later in a private cabin, undressed and bleeding. I remember him standing over me, telling me I should be grateful. She said she tried to leave the next morning, but was threatened by one of Combs's bodyguards. He said, "You leave, and we leak your photos." Nicole, personal. Assistant Nicole worked for Combs for 2 years. Her testimony gave the case a logistical backbone. She described booking hotel suites for guests under fake names, scheduling doctors to administer IVs and injections, to keep Combs awake during parties, packaging cash in gym bags to hand to women after encounters. Witnessing Combs destroy phones, throw laptops in pools, and shred documents before raids. She admitted she'd signed multiple NDAs, but said, at some point, silence is just complicity. The video evidence. The prosecution then pivoted to what it called its silent witnesses, the digital files recovered during the March 2024 raids. federal agents had obtained over 13 terabytes of data, including encrypted hard drives from Combs's LA and Miami Homes Cloud accounts tied to shell companies' deleted iPhone backups. Some of the videos shown in court were pixelated for privacy, but the descriptions were enough to make the courtroom gasp. Footage of unconscious women being dragged onto beds by men in suits, women crying and begging to leave while Combs shouted off-screen, Combs laughing as he threatened someone, "You talk, I kill you." The defense argued that none of the women in the videos were underage and many had signed waivers or been paid. They claimed the videos were selectively edited and didn't prove force or coercion. But prosecutors responded by pointing out that silence, compliance, or payment after the fact doesn't equal consent, especially when drugs, intimidation, and power imbalances are in play. The inside men flip. The trial's most shocking moment came on May 27th, when prosecutors called Jamal J. Isaac, Combs's former head of security. Nobody expected him to testify. For years, he had been one of Diddy's most trusted enforcers. But Isaac had flipped. In exchange for immunity from obstruction charges, he told the court how Combs allegedly ordered him to break a guy's jaw for talking to the press. They routinely swept rooms for hidden recorders and used burner phones for the real calls. Combs kept a secret stash of NDAs, burner devices, and USB drives in a vault behind a mirror in his LA mansion. When asked why he finally decided to speak out, Isaac looked straight ahead and said, "I've got 2 daughters. I couldn't keep protecting. A man who does this to women." Public fallout escalated as the trial unfolded. The world reacted in real time. Brands severed ties with Combs's empire. Ciroc pulled out, Revolt TV suspended operations, and Macy's removed his fashion line. High-profile supporters, including musicians, quietly deleted old posts and photos with him. New alleged victims contacted the DOJ almost daily, some from overseas. Even among hip-hop's elite, the silence was deafening. Only a handful of rappers like Meek Mill and French Montana offered vague, cautionary support. Others distanced themselves entirely. The defense takes the stage by May 30th. The prosecution rested. They had delivered 28 witnesses, over 90 exhibits, and some of the most disturbing testimony ever heard in a celebrity trial. But the defense wasn't done. In June 2025, Combs's team would call their own slate of witnesses: celebrity friends, ex-employees, sexologists, trauma experts, and even former girlfriends who would say the relationships were kinky, not criminal. The stakes were higher than ever, because if the defense couldn't dismantle what the prosecution had built brick by brick, Sean Diddy Combs would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. The defense strikes back, June 10th, 2025. After nearly a month of gripping testimony from former associates, bodyguards, and women who said their lives were permanently altered by Sean Diddy Combs, the defense finally had its turn. With the prosecution's case now laid bare, built on patterns of coercion, sex trafficking, intimidation, and digital evidence, Combs' attorneys launched their counteroffensive. Their objective was clear: unravel the image of a powerful predator and replace it with that of a misunderstood mogul, flawed certainly, but far from criminal. June 3rd, 2025. The defense opens lead defense attorney Jeffrey Lichtman, known for representing clients like El Chapo, stood before the jury with his trademark defiance. What you've witnessed over the past few weeks is a masterclass in storytelling, but not in law. This case has been built not on evidence but emotion, not on fact but fervor. Lichtman didn't deny Combs' lavish lifestyle or volatile temper. Instead, he argued that none of it added up to sex trafficking or conspiracy. Instead, he framed the allegations as revisionist regret. He began to methodically deconstruct each piece of the prosecution's narrative. June 4-6. The credibility attack Cassie Ventura's testimony revisited Cassie's emotional civil case, and the graphic details of her abuse formed the prosecution's foundation. But the defense brought in 2 former managers and a tour consultant who claimed Ventura enjoyed full autonomy in her years with Combs. One even referred to her as the one who called the shots behind closed doors. The strategy was to blur the line between victim and participant. questioning motive. The defense team also suggested that some of the accusers were motivated by financial gain, pointing out that several had pending civil suits and had been paid. Substantial settlements, Lichtman told the court. When money enters the equation, memories become malleable. Facts get fuzzy, and truth takes a back seat. June 7th, the former bodyguard speaks for the defense. The prosecution had earlier presented a key witness, a former bodyguard, who testified to cleaning up after violent incidents and helping deliver drugs and women to Combs at parties. Now, the defense introduced another former member of Combs' security detail, offering a starkly different perspective. This witness, referred to as Chris D., for safety concerns claimed he never witnessed non-consensual activity. Combs was very private and obsessed with NDAs precisely because of fear of false allegations. Many parties were high-profile celebrity scenes, not underground trafficking hubs. On cross-examination, the prosecution pointed out inconsistencies in his employment timeline and suggested he was still receiving financial protection from Combs' business network. Still, the testimony introduced a layer of ambiguity. June 8 through 9. The character witnesses. The courtroom saw a parade of character witnesses, including a former philanthropic partner who praised Combs' scholarship initiatives, a female music executive who described him as demanding but protective, an old friend who recounted how Combs once helped a homeless teen get housing and therapy. These stories were strategically placed to reframe Combs as a complicated human being, flawed but not monstrous. But the prosecution argued this was a diversion. Harvey Weinstein funded charities. So did Epstein. Good deeds don't cancel out crimes. June 10, 2025. Will Diddy testify? By the end of June 10th, the question on everyone's lips was, will Sean Combs take the stand in his own defense? In court, Jeffrey Lichtman told the judge and prosecution that the defense had not yet made a final decision. He requested a short recess to allow private consultation. Rumors swirled. Some legal analysts said Diddy might testify to reframe his story in the jury's eyes. Others warned that cross-examination could open him up to devastating exposure, particularly with the undercover surveillance footage already presented. A source close to the legal team told CNN anonymously he wants to speak, but he's also terrified of losing control of the narrative. As of June 10th, no decision has been finalized. Where the case stands now, with the prosecution's case wrapped and the defense nearing completion, the trial teeters at a pivotal moment. Here's what we know. The jury appears engaged with frequent note-taking. Public interest remains intense with daily courthouse protests and trending hashtags. More defense witnesses may be called, but time is running short. A decision on Combs' testimony is expected soon, if the defense rests within the next few days. Closing arguments could begin by mid-June, with jury deliberation possibly starting in the 3rd or 4th week of June, but that remains unconfirmed. Trial status as of June 10, 2025. The federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs is in its 5th week at the U.S. District Court in Manhattan. After explosive opening weeks filled with damning prosecution testimony, the case has now shifted to its most delicate phase, the defense's final moves and the looming question of whether Combs will take the stand. As of now, the prosecution has rested. The defense is near completion. No decision has been announced regarding whether Combs will testify. Closing arguments and jury deliberations have not yet begun. There is no official end date confirmed for the trial. That timeline will depend heavily on how the defense proceeds in the coming days. Key developments: so far prosecution's case, a pattern of power and predation. The prosecution presented over 25 witnesses, including former partners, assistants, and ex-bodyguards who described coercion, abuse, and secret surveillance, alleged victims who shared harrowing stories of sexual exploitation and physical abuse. Digital evidence, emails, texts, and financial transactions suggesting coordination. Of alleged trafficking activities, recovered surveillance footage and photographs, some reportedly from private safes found during federal raids. The overarching narrative painted Combs as the mastermind of a celebrity-powered sex trafficking operation cloaked in wealth and status. Defense's counter: consent, contradictions, and character. The defense began its presentation on June 3rd, arguing that the accusers were motivated by money, fame, or revenge. The relationships were consensual, and the women involved were fully aware participants in the lifestyle. The so-called trafficking enterprise was non-existent, and the case was a product of media pressure and overreach. Witnesses for the defense included former associates, who vouched for Combs' behavior, a security team member who denied seeing any coercion, philanthropic partners, and industry peers offering character references. The team's main goal has been to inject reasonable doubt into the prosecution's sweeping narrative. The unanswered question: will Combs testify? As of June 10, 2025, no public statement has been made confirming whether Sean Combs will testify in his own defense. Legal analysts are divided. Some say he may testify, hoping to reclaim control of the narrative and humanize himself before the jury. Others argue it would be highly risky, potentially opening him to devastating cross-examination, especially given the extensive digital evidence and past contradictory statements. A court filing is expected in the coming days to confirm the defense's final decision. Public and industry reaction ongoing. Public sentiment remains sharply divided. Support for the accusers' high-profile voices, including activists, and some artists have publicly supported the women who testified. Justice for Cassie continues to trend. Women's rights groups have held rallies outside the courthouse. Cassie Ventura, though not a witness in the criminal trial, remains a symbolic figure in the broader reckoning. Defenders of Combs. Some in the music industry continue to stand by Combs, accusing the media and justice system of targeting another black celebrity. Notably, some longtime friends and collaborators have remained silent, signaling either discomfort or strategic distancing. What happens next? Pending developments. This week, June 10, 14, final decision on whether Combs will testify. Additional defense witnesses, if any. Possible early signs of wrapping up. Likely late June. Closing arguments by both the prosecution and defense. Jury instructions from the judge. Jury deliberations begin, exact date unknown. If convicted, the sentencing would be scheduled later this year. Combs could face decades in federal prison. Depending on the charges upheld, charges faced by Combs is currently facing multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to engage in sex trafficking, transporting individuals across state lines for illegal sexual activity, obstruction of justice witness, tampering possession of illegal surveillance material, money laundering linked to hush payments and shell companies. The most serious charge, conspiracy to traffic, carries a mandatory minimum of 15 years if convicted. The broader fallout even before a verdict, the fallout has been significant. Business losses. Combs has already stepped down from leadership at Revolt. Partnerships with Ciroc and DeLeon have dissolved. His brand, Sean John, is in limbo. Civil suits. More than 8 women and 3 men have filed civil claims. FBI and IRS investigations are still active, with further charges not ruled out. This case has already shifted the tone in the music industry, with many now questioning the silence that surrounded Combs for decades. Legacy under siege. Whatever the jury decides, Sean Diddy Combs' once mythic legacy has been forever altered. Gone is the image of the untouchable mogul, replaced by the reality of a man at the mercy of a system he never thought he'd be accountable to. Whether vindicated or condemned, his story will now always include this trial, and the women, the whispers, and the truths long buried beneath platinum records and champagne-soaked parties.
What did you think of the case? Please share your thoughts in the comment below. If you want more video like this, please be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime videos. See you in the next one.